Matt Dolloff in studio with us for a whole hour. The next hour, we got Dolloff in the building. Dolloff, what's going on?
Good to see you, Bart. Thanks for having me.
Good
the
to
only
see
thing
you.
I didn't like about Ty's rant is that it took it all out of his system before we could do the Sports Hub Underground. So,
I was going to say, how are you? Be honest. Are you a little bit mad that wasn't from the podcast?
I was a little bit perturbed that all happened
That's
while
fair.
he was on, but I knew it was going to happen during Zone
Yeah.
Beetle. It was a great idea to have him on. That was a stroke of genius, whoever came up with that idea.
Yeah.
Put him on for that particular show. And, thank you to the Bruins for ruining Ty's day there.
Well, Skaz, I don't know if you cut that or somebody else cut that. That's the first time I've heard the clip without the intro where Beetle tells him, like, they signed, or McCohen tells him they signed Tanner Jeannot, and he goes, and you get that. It's so much better. He goes right into it like that. But that was Ty Anderson's reaction last week to free agency in particular. And look, you mentioned ruining Ty's day. To a certain point, I get it. Like, I can relate to that in that when you cover a team and you're going through the early stages of the offseason and really laying the foundation for what the upcoming season is going to be. And fans can probably relate to this too, but we deal with it professionally. That's your life for the next 9 months. And like Ty's reaction, that's what, like, this is the product I'm going to have to get people interested in for the next 9 months. Was your reaction, now you weren't on air, so I don't know if you were in your apartment yelling or anything like that. I don't know, maybe you were here. Were you as emotional as Ty was seeing what the Bruins did in free agency?
I wouldn't say so. I'm a little more measured emotionally,
Okay.
I would say.
Internally.
I tend to bottle it up and keep it inside.
Yeah.
The rage is turned inward, I would say. Ty, Ty's a great guy, but has a little bit of an edge to him.
Wears
in
it
a
on
good
his
way.
sleeve. Nothing wrong with
In
that.
a good, yeah, he wears it on his sleeve. That's what makes him great at radio, makes him great on the Sports Hub Underground. The Bruins do something he doesn't like, he's the absolute first person you should listen to, and that's why, I probably didn't have quite as emotional a reaction. Plus, I was listening live. I was here in the war room trying to get, get the articles up and all that, so I had to sort of focus. I couldn't really get up and start breaking stuff in the office. I had to sort of focus and write. So it was good.
Come in, slap Ty around like that scene in Airplane.
Yeah, seriously, yeah. We just line up with like boxing gloves and a crowbar, and just that's what it felt like with the moves. Like each successive move, the Tanner Jeannot was like just the lady with the gun walking up to him. It was obviously a disappointing day for anyone that thought. Definitely, if they thought if you thought they were gonna make a big move, it was a disappointing day. I wasn't really expecting that. Ty actually sort of set the table. Was like, I wouldn't get too
I
excited.
think he told Beetle, did he say like you're gonna hate what they do today or something like that?
You're gonna hate what they do. It's just gonna be complimentary guys and short money, role players, energy guys, things like that. And they did a lot of that. It was obviously the Tanner Jeannot signing that sort of sent him over the edge because it's a 5-year deal.
I was gonna say, like, it is, I guess, short money, 3.4 per year, but a 5-year deal feels like a significant contract, just relatively speaking.
Right, yeah. $3.4 million, with the cap going up isn't necessarily a huge investment year to year. But here's the thing that people might be forgetting. The cap's going up across the league. It's not going up for just the Boston Bruins. It's all relative. I wouldn't have made that long-term of an investment in a player like Tanner Jeannot. Ty and I both agreed if it was a 1 or 2 year deal for Tanner Jeannot, that would have been a lot more palatable. The kind of guy that any team could use if you want to be a winning team, a tough team, things like that. Tanner Jeannot's a solid addition. The 5-year thing, Barth, you said this is the next 9 months of our lives.
Yeah.
That deal makes it feel like this is going to be the next 5 years of our lives.
Sure.
That's the problem with the Tanner Jeannot signing is that are they going to transition to being more of a speed skill team, which I think you need a lot more than what they've had in recent years to be a winning hockey team. And no, I don't want them to go entirely in the direction of speed and skill. You don't want to be all offense. You have to play some defense. You got to keep the puck out of the net at some point. But it feels like that's what the Bruins want to be. They just want to be the team that's tough to play against. We're going to play tight defense. We're going to have great goaltending. A lot is going to be riding on Jeremy Swayman to come in here, have a full camp, and have a huge bounce-back year. He's probably going to have a huge year for them to, get back into the playoffs with a quick 1-year turnaround. The free agent signings make it feel like this is more of like a bridge year. Like not necessarily like this is a big, long rebuild, but all the other guys they signed 1 or 2 year deals feels like they're sort of bridging the gap between now and when all these prospects they have and draft picks are finally ready to come in. Like, I'm not saying you got to put James Higgins in the lineup next season. Like, he needs time to develop. Most most draft picks do.
Well, doesn't that feel almost a little Red Soxian? Isn't this what the Red Sox spent the last 5 years doing? Marcelo Mayer, Roman Anthony, Christian Campbell. They're coming. The South Park episode of J.R.R. Tolkien, they're on their way. They're coming. I promise. They're almost here. And it's like, but can you be competitive while we wait? No, the kids will be here soon. Just focus on the kids. And you mentioned the need for speed and skill, and they did address that in the draft, and I want to get to that. But in Ty's rant, the one word he used that I read that resonated with me the most,
punch.
Besides that, that's a great line. What's he going to do? Punch the puck in the net. I had Connor Ryan on that night, and poor Connor, I opened up, I think, asked him, how many pucks is James Hagan's going to punch in the net? And I don't think he knew how to answer. But the word that really resonated with me was annoying, because I want my hockey team to play with edge. Maybe I'm old school in that. I want them to crack skulls. I want them to be a physical presence. I want them to beat the other team up. I want guys to not enjoy playing against them. I don't want like a pure speed and skill team. I like having players like Sean Corrali and Tanner Jeannot on my hockey team in general. But I don't want it to be the whole hockey team, right? There's a balance, everything in moderation. And so it's not, I don't necessarily hate any of the individual signings. Jeannot in a bubble is fine. I have no problem with them signing a player like that. Sean Corrali in a bubble is fine. I have no problem with them signing a player like that. But when you put them all on top of each other and there's really nothing else, it is, again, to use Ty's word, annoying. And Don Sweeney talked about wanting to be tougher, right? And I think he said everybody stands a little taller when we have guys like that on the ice. Nikita Zadorov's still on this team, right? Mm-hmm. Mark Kasterlik's still on this team, right?
He is.
Like, did they not have that presence before? Do they maybe not think those guys are as tough? So that's what I keep coming back to. It's just like, I don't hate the individual signings. The overall approach is annoying.
Yeah, I think it was Elliot Friedman said on 32 Thoughts today that they signed Tanner Jeannot in part because he can now be the enforcer of the team, and he can take that burden off guys like Zadorov and Kastelik. And like, not that I don't want Kastelik fighting, but hasn't he had concussions, I believe? He's had issues with that, so I think they want to take that off his plate. And they want Zadorov, I think, to focus on just playing defense.
Just be more of a featured player.
Just police the defensive zone, hit people. He's going to keep hitting people. Yeah. But I think if he can, stay focused on playing within the system and just playing a strong defensive game, policing, the net front area, clearing bodies out, giving Jeremy Swayman better looks at the puck, I think that'll go a long way where he doesn't have to feel like he has to be the guy to sort of answer the bell when it comes time to, drop the gloves or, just police the game and protect your teammates. I think Tanner Jeannot is going to do that.
Yeah.
It's not a personal thing against Tanner Jeannot.
No, I have no doubt. What he does well. But what he does is not necessarily what the Bruins' biggest need was. And that's what kills you is it's speed and skill. And what was crazy is that you look at their approach in the draft, putting aside where all the players grew up and where they went to college and what conference they played in. It felt like they added speed and skill in the draft. So you look at that and you think, is there a change in philosophy coming? Don Sweeney comes back after this rough year, still has his job, right? The front office remains intact. And it was, something's got to change. Something's got to change. And they have that draft, and it's like, okay, stylistically, this looks a little different. And then it's that hard left turn back into what they've been in free agency. Did the draft surprise you? Did free agency going the way it did after the draft surprise you? Like, how do you put those two approaches together? Because it feels like they took a very different approach to free agency in the draft.
The draft surprised me because this has long been their approach. We want to play a tough game, two-way game. We want to be stout defensively. That's been their identity for a while, and that's, I think, why they brought in Marco Sturm. Don Sweeney said in that April press conference, that wonderful press conference they had at TD Garden, that you look at the LA Kings, like he basically said we want to be like the LA Kings. And like, what have the LA Kings really accomplished, in recent years? They've been a good defensive team. They got really great goaltending this past year out of Darcy Kemper, one of the best years of his career. And they snuck into the playoffs, and I picked them to beat Edmonton. That would have been an upset in the first round, but lo and behold, the team with the skill guys, beats out the defensive team. And so that's how it went, and so that's why the draft sort of surprised me. The speed and skill thing feels like a long-term play for the Bruins. Yeah. It feels like that's why they brought in all these guys, Jeannot aside, like the guys like Michael Eyssimont. They brought Sean Corrali back. Those are short-term bridge guys where they're going to give the speed and skill guys time to develop, Maybe we'll see them sprinkled in at some point this season. I'm less confident in that based on all these signings they made. But this is definitely, they want to be that tough to play against team. And like they got a long way to go toward proving that they can be a skill team or at least have enough skill to win. I think they want to be great defensively and in goal and then have enough skill to win. Like I feel like that's what they want to be. And you don't want to be a pure speed and skill team. You want to be able to do everything.
Yep.
It's tough to compare them to, the Florida Panthers because Panthers are kind of a unique case. The Bill Zito's done an amazing job putting that team together, but they're top six.
You mean they're not just bullying everybody in a Stanley Cups?
No.
They actually have good players too?
No, that is inaccurate. Their top six forwards, the driving force of their team, they're all pretty much all-around guys. They can all skate. They all have skill. They all forecheck. They're all unafraid to play that two-way game defensively. Like, it's fine to strive to be that. They're now a multiple Stanley Cup winner. They're going for the dynasty with Brad Marchand, Sam Bennett, all those guys staying. But I think for the Bruins, I think their best course of action is to be able to sprinkle in the skill guys with the tough guys. Don Sweeney himself said Tanner Jeannot, one of his functions is going to be to, I think, create breathing room is how he put it.
Yeah, man, everybody stands taller. That's the quote I keep going back to.
Yeah, I think the idea there is that Tanner Jeannot is going to be able to free up space for, a smaller, skill-minded line mate. The thing is, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when I see it with this GM and especially this head coach. Like, they still want them to play within structure, play within the system, play the way we want them to play. They've had trouble developing players and maybe taking too long, overcooking prospects is how I put it, because they're waiting for them to become this perfect all-around player. And it's like, you're not always going to get guys like that. You have to sprinkle in guys that can score at some point because, being a great defensive team, which I think they have a chance to be with all they've invested in the defense and just guys coming back and playing better than they did last year on that end of the ice. I feel like there's too low of a ceiling for that. And I don't know that this team has a high enough floor to be confident that they're really going to get back to the playoffs. Like, if Jeremy Swayman sucks again, Bart, they're going to suck again. That's the worry that I have.
Doesn't that kind of, I don't know, not to cross sports, isn't that kind of like, well, if Drake May doesn't take the year two leap, the Patriots are going to be bad again? Isn't that kind of just like baked in?
Kind of, yeah, but like a quarterback is more important in football than a goaltender is in hockey. But for the Bruins, I think it might be an apt comparison because there's so much riding specifically on Swayman and playing better at that end of the ice. Like, I think that's not a bad comparison for this particular team.
When you invest that much money in a guy, I understand expecting him to be a cornerstone. I don't think that's an unfair expectation, just like we talked about with Rafael Devers. Like, there's that much money invested in you. The expectations are going to be a little higher than the average player. I don't think that's unfair.
Yeah, no, he's got to be a top 10.
Right, Swayman has to live up to that. But you mentioned before that the overcooking of the prospects, and it seems like they're trying to set this up for some of the younger guys to maybe slot in. Who, when, where? I want to pick your brain on some of these younger guys. Not just James Hagens, not even just the draft picks they had this year. Some of the other guys that have been in the pipeline, some names we've maybe heard the last few years. Can they make an impact this year on the Boston Bruins? Like, we know James Hagens is going back to BC, and that's probably the right move, right, for him to get another college year. So
I think so, yeah. Give him one more year.
We can talk about when we're going to see him, but Fabian Lysell right now not slotting in. Fraser Minton right now not slotting in. Merkulov, who was up here last year, he's going to be competing for a spot. Even a guy like Mason Lowry, he's just played one full season. If they're going to surprise people, it's going to be these younger players taking that next step. So from those guys I've mentioned, is maybe somebody else. Like, if you were to do a Bruins 4 under 24, right, that kind of thing, who are the young guys that you're looking at to make an impact this year? And are you worried that maybe some of the guys that could make that impact might be buried?
Unfortunately, 4 players for next season sounds a little high to me, Barth.
I mean,
players.
I just gave you a couple names. So you think we might not even see some of those guys?
Next season?
Yeah, like this upcoming season.
I'm not sure about Fabian Lysell at all. Like, that's a guy that struggled to crack the NHL lineup, and I know he came up late last year after the trade deadline, and he had his moments. But that's a guy I point to as a guy that they've overcooked and waited too long and waited for him to sort of become this perfect like all-around player that can do everything. Like, just let him get out there and skate and shoot the puck a little bit. And he showed a little more tenacity, I thought, than I was expecting, getting in there on the forecheck. And you talk about being hard to play against. Like, he's kind of hard to play against on offense. You know, he puts a lot of pressure on you. And so he's a guy I'd love to see in the NHL. I just don't see him as, he's not a bottom six player. He'd have to be in your top six. And so right now I got it as Geeky, Lindholm, Pasternak, first line.
Yeah.
Second line, Pavel Zacha, Casey Middlestat, and Victor Arvidsson, the guy they traded for that wasn't a free agent signing. And so it feels like the top six is all clogged up with those guys. And, like, you know, some of it you understand, but it's going to have to be in the bottom six for guys to come in. And I don't know if you mentioned Matthew Poitras. He's still
so I was going to ask you about him, too, yeah.
He's a guy that I feel like he's going to have to convert to right wing at some point because he's just so undersized to play center. And it just feels like he doesn't fit in, sort of the hierarchy of center, at least for this team right now. Maybe they could trade him somewhere where they think they could use him at center. But the guys you mentioned, I think Fraser Minten has a good chance to come up and make an impact next year. I think he could be your third line center.
Why is that? What does he do? What does he bring?
Because he plays that sort of all around game. I think Sweeney compared him to Charlie Coyle when they brought him in. And so, like, he can play a 200-foot game. He's not afraid to sort of muck it up. He's not afraid to. He went to the front of the net a lot and scored a couple goals that way down at the end of the year last year. And so that was a good sign. And so he has that sort of NHL-ready game, the kind of game that the Bruins like. And so that's a guy that I feel like could come up next year and actually, go into the lineup and do a lot of the things that they want everyone to do, even if it's your first year, second year in the league. They still want you to play that responsible 200-foot game, which I know it gets him in trouble with prospects and development and all that, but Minten can do that. Another guy, I don't know if you actually mentioned him, but Marat Hustadinov.
I did not.
Who also came over here in the trade deadline last year, and they also re-signed. He's another guy who's a little small to play center. He came into the league as a center prospect, but he played more wing down the stretch of the season. This is a good, smart player. In Minnesota, they played him a lot in the defensive zone. And so I think that sort of led to, that was why he didn't score much. But he's got a little bit of speed and skill, and I think he can also play a two-way game, and he can do it on the wing. And so I would love to see a Hustadinov Minten third line next year. Okay. That is sort of like the upper end of my ambition for the team. Maybe Matthew Poitras could slide over to right wing, and you got a nice third line of young up-and-coming players. But that, to me, is the best hope. I would love to see Fabian Lysell get another crack at the NHL, and they've said it for like 5 years now, ever since they drafted him, however long it's been. Well, they're going to have a chance to compete. They're going to have a chance to get in the lineup here, and then it never happens.
You think they're going to open up with those veterans in the lineup? And
I think Terry Jeannot is on your third line. I think Michael Eyssimont, another guy they signed, he could be a fourth line guy. Sean Corrali is an NHL player. Like, I just feel like they're all clogged up down there.
There was another guy they signed you were high on. You wrote a column about it. I can't remember his name.
Matej Blumel.
Yeah,
the kid they signed from the Dallas Stars. I'm glad you brought him up. I can't believe I didn't even think of him. That's a guy I could see cracking the bottom six this coming year. David Pasternak called him, a fellow countryman from Czech Republic, Czechia, whatever it's called now. He recruited him, basically. He said that we'd love to have you. And this is a guy that he's been lighting it up in the AHL. And in the Dallas Stars organization, they're pretty stacked at the wing spots. There wasn't really a spot for him. And so, look, if Blumel was this big hidden gem diamond in the rough, he probably wouldn't have left Dallas. Right. Dallas would have kept him. But can he come in and be, a third line, maybe middle six type of energy forward who can score a little bit? Like, I think he has a chance to be that guy. So that's another one. That's a good one that he's actually been in, at least NHL organizations for a few years. Yeah. It's been a lot of AHL time, so he might spend a lot of time in Providence too. But that's the one signing out of all those free agents that actually has me pretty intrigued about the upside there.
So that's just the forwards. Any hope for any sort of young up-and-comer on defense?
Not yet.
No,
not yet. I think
what would a next step look like for Mason Lohrei? Do you think he can get there? Because he now has a full season under his belt.
Yeah, well, I think working with Marco Sturm could help Lohrei a bit. He has nowhere to go but up in terms of his plus minus.
Right.
Everyone's big on his minus 45 or whatever he was last year. It was ugly.
I mean, that's not good.
And look, there's a reason. look, a guy with his size and offensive skill set, if he were like a good in the defensive end, that's like a top 10 draft pick. There's a reason he fell to the 60th pick or whatever it was. So I don't think he's ever going to be great in the defensive end, but if he can get up to a level of being average, serviceable, and then his skill takes another step forward, he starts to contribute on the power play a little bit. Like he could be a good top 4 defenseman if he puts that all together. And I think if he can take the coaching from Marco Sturm and Sturm can sort of tap into him and get him to play more of a two-way 200-foot type of game, maybe they unlock something there and, he takes a step forward. That could make a big difference for him. I think other than him, you got Hampus Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov on the left side. So the left side's pretty much locked in. Right side, you got McAvoy, you have Henry Jokiharju, and you have Andrew Peeke. And I just don't see a right-shot defenseman in the organization that's really ready to sort of seize the opportunity there. So I feel like those 6 guys that I just mentioned, I think that's your defense.
That's pretty chalk. Like there's not a ton of competition at that spot.
I think the question is just who's paired with who. I think that's what we're looking at.
And then, like you said, it all comes down to the goalie. What do they get out of the goalie? What do they get out of Jeremy Swayman next year? Are you still a believer in Jeremy Swayman?